enough of that. That's enough of that intro music. Welcome to the show. Mass Casualty, I've seen you in the YouTube chat. You're just going for your dinner. Enjoy your dinner. You can restart the show once you've eaten. We're live. It's Friday, whatever time you are in the world. Maybe it's Saturday morning in some of the world as well. We're live on YouTube. Welcome to another week. Episode 47 of our podcast now. It would be much higher, but we got lazy and started doing it every 2 weeks. But anyway, there we go. Do you want on the show with us? Say that again.
I said it's my fault that we did it every 2 weeks.
Is it? No, it's Sammy's fault because he decided to go away. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Tom is thousands of miles away, further than me.
Yeah, and Tom gets up at like 5 a.m. to join us.
That sounds like his problem.
Yeah, exactly. See, this is the attitude that we got from you, and why we ended up going every 2 weeks. Right. Anyway, with us this week we've got Harrison /WooMao86, bane of certain Twitch streamers. Right? You keep looking at Twitch streamers from behind blocks. I've heard. I don't know.
Yeah, apparently so. Yeah.
I don't know.
Going on, but it's good fun.
I'm gonna say. Fun. As long as you Twitter feuding is just for like good fun and not like seriously, there you go.
Yeah, all good, all in good spirits. At least from my end.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
Nice. Sammy, you're live from Norway, right?
That is indeed true. Yes.
Nice.
It's bloody freezing here.
What's it like in Norway apart from freezing?
Cold.
Cold.
Yes.
Well, you couldn't get any closer to like the North Pole without actually going to the North Pole. So, you know, it's your own fault if you think it's cold. Right. Yeah. Joining us whenever he gets up, because like I say, it's like, 4 or 5 in the morning in China. Tom will be with us, so he'll just start speaking at some point in the show. Sammy, your task is to harass him while the show's going on to make sure he gets up. I'm sure Vito will be joining us as well. When he gets up from Hong Kong, we've got painting as always. Artsy Marxist. What are you painting this week, Artsy? Let me get you up on the screen while you introduce yourself.
Hi y'all. Yeah, today I'm doing a commission of what the future will look like once communism has been like instated. So nice. They just told me to like let my imagination run. I'm gonna do kind of like a Bob Ross style futuristic cityscape, I think. But yeah, so that'll be kind of fun.
Did Bob Ross do cityscapes? I've never seen a Bob Ross cityscape.
No, he did not, but I'm going to be using like techniques like with the palette knife in order to achieve it. So I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never tried this before.
Nice.
So we'll see how it goes, right?
Another Mango Press exclusive. Bob Ross style cityscapes. And also joining us this week, you all might know him on Twitter as Brother Q, Andre. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. Yourself?
Great. It's nice to talk to you in person finally. You get a sense of who people are and what they're like just off of their shooting power. But I didn't know that you were British. So it's thrown me for a bit of a loop.
Yeah. Well, we've got members from all over, but the podcast is just the like British side because we're the only people who have the time to do it, I guess. But yeah, our team's from all over. Like I say, Tom at the minute he's in China, so we've got Vito in Hong Kong.
He likes your accent.
I think he likes your accent, Sammy. You're the one with a posh accent. But there you go, Sammy. You're not even British. You've just got a British accent. What a crippling disability that is.
No, shut up.
Well, I have a lot of family from the UK. I mean, being Jamaican, you normally do have family in the UK. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to speak to somebody who doesn't have a Liverpool accent for once.
Oh well, we'll have to get Tom to just not show up. Then.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No, I got some Scousers in the family.
Nice. We'll tell Tom to not show up for the show though. It'll be brilliant. But
yeah, I mean, if he does show up for the show and I'm on it, I'm going to need an interpreter, please.
All right. Well, so do I, and I'm British, right? You know what it's like, Harrison, in the chat. I'm constantly giving him crap for being a Scouse, right?
Yeah. I'm surprised he can get up at 5 days, getting up at midday.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Right. Anyway, on with the show. Let's get right into it. Sammy, you want to talk about Yemen, am I right?
Well, not just Yemen, but honestly the whole region, because like the recent events the past week or week and a half are like really interconnected, as they are. Well, nothing is honestly separate in a vacuum according to the Marxist study of society. But
nothing is political, right? Nothing is not political.
Absolutely, yeah. Like
Sorry.
You can say that the wine bottles are hitting the ceiling, so to speak, with Saudi Arabia. That's absolutely going mad this week,
Right.
as we kind of saw towards Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a few days ago, this new Lebanese communications minister called George Qardahi, he was sort of a celebrity TV host in the Middle East a few years ago. And now he's the Lebanese communication minister. Mm-hmm. Now, a few weeks before he was appointed, he was a guest on a show that's basically funded by Qatari money, that spoils the minds of the Arab masses. And he said, when he was challenged on
Is this
Yemen...
Al Jazeera show?
I don't believe so. It was like a Saudi one. Sorry, well, I think this one was a Saudi-funded one. It wasn't Al Jazeera.
Right, okay.
But moving on, when challenged on the question of Yemen, he said that the war on Yemen is quote-unquote a mess, it is unnecessary, etc. It's a waste of time, and it's like people are dying for just nothing, basically. Now, obviously, in the Marxist sense, we know that these wars are profitable and such, but like this is still a better position than most other, like 90% of other media pundits and so after that started to circulate, this clip of him saying that from a few weeks ago, the Saudis absolutely lost their mind. They said, we want this guy to resign from the government, we want him to apologize. They went as far as even pulling their ambassador outside of taking their ambassador outside of Lebanon, as well as asking Bahrain and the UAE to do the same thing, to follow suit.
Hold on, Sammy.
They cut diplomatic ties with them. Not only that, but they embargoed the Lebanese as well. They banned Lebanese products from entering Saudi Arabia.
Right.
They banned the sending of money between the two countries, like using MoneyGram and such.
This was like
even Post.
This was like
it's ridiculous,
well, right?
And now they're threatening to kick out like 100,000 Lebanese citizens, or the tens of thousands of Lebanese citizens that are living in Saudi Arabia. It's madness.
Right. Okay, Sammy, hold on. Andre, did you have something to say then? Did somebody cut in on?
I was double muted. No. I was just listening to the narrative.
All right. Okay. Go on, Sammy. Carry on.
This was going on, and people, honestly, from an outsider's point of view, this is really it might be a bit of an overreaction. However, the thing is, this comes in the context of Saudi Arabia losing its grip on Lebanon, so to speak, because the anti-imperialist forces, most notably Hezbollah, last election in 2018, they had the highest percentage of the popular vote. Mm-hmm. Basically, the Saudi puppets, like the Future Movement Party, basically Saudi puppets. The prime minister from the Future Party movement was essentially kidnapped by Saudi Arabia a few years ago, shortly after the elections. People might remember that, but yeah, essentially, domestically in Lebanon, the Saudis are losing their grip on the Lebanese government and their influence in Lebanon, due to, honestly, Hezbollah's ever-increasing popularity. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but on the other side of their country, in Yemen, down south.
The other side of Saudi Arabia, right?
Yeah, on the other side of Saudi Arabia. They are about to lose their main stronghold, or the stronghold of the last standing stronghold of their puppets, the Hadi government, so-called Hadi government, mm-hmm. in Madrid. Mm-hmm. As about 3 days ago, the Yemeni army and popular committees announced that they successfully carried out the second phase, or the second part of the Spring of Victory operation, which resulted in liberating all areas of Ma'rib except the city itself in the valley. Which means that pretty much all streets leading to Ma'rib, apart from the one that comes from Saudi Arabia, are cut off from the Saudi puppets, and basically there's nowhere else to go. Now, yesterday we saw mass defections in Ma'rib, like all these tribes members, the influential tribe members, defected from the puppet government to the revolutionaries, the popular committees, and the Yemeni National Army, which was indeed a very good sign. And it means that the liberation of Ma'rib, which, as we pointed out before, is a very important strategic location in Yemen, as it's very central, it has a lot of oil resources, it has a lot of human resources, and it's also the last bastion of the Saudi puppets, as we just mentioned. So the Saudis feel that they are surrounded, kind of thing.
Right.
Or not surrounded, they are just losing their influence in general, which is why they put on such a massive overreaction towards something that people might consider unworthy of such reactions, like just some comments by a minister a few weeks ago. But it wasn't just because of that. Their overreaction was because that they are losing pretty much on both main fronts, which basically they play the role of the US's foot in the Middle East as well, as we all know. Also recently, which was quite an incredible sight to witness, I sent you a thread and also a video of what happened in the Sea of Oman, or the Persian Gulf.
I've got that.
Now, what happened 2 days ago was that an American warship pirated an Iranian oil tanker.
Attempted to.
Stole it. Sorry?
Attempted to, right?
No, they didn't. They didn't just attempt to. They did.
No,
They stole.
So they were diverting it off course, right?
I
don't think.
Let me just explain. Yeah, let me explain what happened, because there's a bit of confusion about this. What happened was that this American warship pirated an Iranian oil tanker and transferred the contents of it, all the oil, to another tanker.
Right.
And this other tanker was headed to, quote, an unknown location. And then Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps speedboats chased off. First of all, they chased off the American warship. Literally, it was such a sight to see, the Iranians chasing off the Americans with their gunboats. And also, the Iranians carried out a counter-operation where they made an air invasion, I think it's called. That's the rough translation I found. Basically, by helicopter, they landed onto that stolen, or that oil tanker that has their stolen oil in it. They took control of it and forced them to redivert back to the Persian Gulf, or back to their territorial waters, and they got back that oil. So it was really an incredible counter-piracy operation. It honestly was the first outright confrontation of US forces in decades, and possibly, like, even Russia didn't yet carry out such a thing, and when the Americans put their warships in the Black Sea or something, or when the Americans drive through Chinese territorial waters.
And not even that, right? Just watch the video on screen now. This destroyer is headed off by a catamaran and 3 speedboats and 1 helicopter. Right? That's all it takes. You've just got to bully them out of the waters, that's all. They put themselves between, like you say, the helicopter dropped troops onto the tanker, right, to retake it. And then the speedboats just wedged themselves between them and were like, your move, right? You're not going to run us over, because that would be a real act of war, right? You would cause a ruin. Because the thing about these sort of incidents are that the civilian population doesn't get is that this is done in international waters, right? So there's no law there, right? So the US isn't really doing anything wrong unless they get caught. They have to get caught by a nation for anything to happen. Now, if they were to then,
I suppose it.
but if they were to shoot at the Iranian boats or damage them in any way, because it's the Iranian military, that would be an act of war, right? So the way to stop the US, the US goes around the world projecting that it's this power that it's. I mean, the Brits did it against Russia in the Black Sea as well, projecting this power that they're all powerful and unstoppable, and they get showed off by 3 speedboats, right?
Indeed, yeah. But also another thing, like I forgot to mention about Lebanon. You remember when a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago we were talking about that incident in Payuna in Beirut, Lebanon, when the fascist Lebanese Forces Party carried out this massacre with the aim of
the very recent one.
Yeah, the very recent one when they attempted to escalate things to a civil war.
Yes.
We obviously know that this party is heavily funded by Saudi Arabia, and as well, also their TV stations, by the way, MTV Lebanon TV station. It's not like the American MTV, by the way, just putting it out there. It's more like a news station. As proven by WikiLeaks, or documents released by WikiLeaks, they are heavily funded by Saudi Arabia. Also, if you go on the Wikipedia page that explains the Saudi cables, they explain what the Saudi Arabia's strategy of media influence in the Arab world, how they carry that out. So yeah, just throwing that out there for extra information. But even like this is connected because they see that their attempts at regaining influence over Lebanon or the Lebanese government or Lebanese society is just deteriorating. So yeah, that's just to give a background on what's happened, on what's been happening in the recent couple of weeks.
But again, this isn't it's not an obscure example, is it? To see, I mean, this is what Venezuela did, but it's at sea, right? This is what, like you said, this is what Russia have been doing for a long time. It's being able to resist, isn't it? That's the point.
Well, I mean, I think because the Iranians are kind of like on the front line, or they are facing the brunt of imperialist aggression, that they need to be this daring against directly daring against U.S. forces. Because, for example, you wouldn't see Russia and China doing something like this, like Russia chasing off American warships with their gunboats out of the Black Sea, for example. If they were on the front line, like, sorry.
You would, though. You would see this. I mean, the British Navy won't even enter Chinese waters. They're that scared anymore. The British media will publish, oh, we're sailing into the South China Sea, and then they don't go anywhere that, quote unquote, could be controversial, should I say, right?
Yes.
So, and the reason why is because this sort of thing would have happened before. Iran has just now got to the point where it can do it too, and more countries are doing it, right? That's the difference. It's not that I don't think Iran is doing something that Russia has not done. We've got to the point now where all these countries have stood up for themselves enough to the point where they're strong enough to all do this. I mean, Russia's been doing this since the Bolshevik Revolution, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. That's all we're seeing. We're not only seeing it's not only good because it's a example of defense from imperialist aggression, right? But it's also a great example of what the empire does. And, you know, do Western citizens condone this sort of behavior, right? This is an act of piracy, right? What you're watching on screen is piracy. That's an Iranian tanker that's been hijacked by apparent Western, military, which is crazy, isn't it? That shouldn't be happening.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think this really puts the Americans in their place in the Middle East. At least it is a demonstration of how the balance of powers really have changed in the last 20 years after the Americans honestly shot themselves in the foot when it comes to the invasion of Iraq, because it didn't go nearly as well as they planned. the invasion of Iraq. And honestly, on top of that, you have huge advancements. The Iranians now have huge advancements in military technology, including air defense systems, state-of-the-art tanks, drones alone. Iran, I remember, is the second largest producer in the world of drones, and their newest one that they uncovered back in May, the Gaza type drone. It has a range of 2,000 miles, and it's capable of both reconnaissance and offensive operations. Imagine that.
And I
so
think also, I was just going to say, I mean, I think examples like this, there's something in the West controversial, isn't there, about defending Iran, right? Because it's seen as how to put this?
They describe it as a theocracy and stuff.
Exactly, right. Which it may be, right, but that's not down. The point I'm trying to make is that's not down for anybody to use against acts like this. Like, if you want to fix Iran, then you need to let Iran grow as a country and have self-determination, so the people can actually govern themselves there without any outside influences, right? And that starts by being against things like this, which isn't just an Iranian issue, right? This is our nations doing this.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's not just that. It's just that, and everyone is pretty much agreed about this. Even Arab communists, is that since 1979, after the Islamic Revolution in Iran, or the Popular Revolution in Iran, really was a turning point, frankly, in the century, because after you had Egypt exit the anti-imperialist camp after basically Sadat shoved them out, Iran honestly has been the bastion of all anti-imperialist activity in the Middle East. They supported, they didn't really care about resistant groups, their ideology. Honestly, anyone who resisted Zionist or American aggression, they had their back. Even Palestinian communists in the 80s were cheering on the Iranian revolutionary government. Even in the 80s, you had the Americans, sadly, back Saddam Hussein, basically, in his invasion of Iran, in order to basically, ruin both countries, honestly.
Right, yeah.
And anyway, yeah, so, and the newly forming axis of resistance, or the one that's been forming in the past decade or slightly more, we've seen with Syria, they even struck the American military base there. So I honestly think we are seeing a qualitative shift that is taking place right now in terms of the balance of powers, and something major I think will happen in the past year or two. Not in the past year. In the next 1 or 2 years, I think there will some kind of major event will happen. It's a bit hard to describe what it is or predict what it is, but honestly, I think the region, it really is preparing to honestly kick out the Americans for good.
We saw it with Palestine back in May. There was something different about how Palestine stood up. I mean, I know it was horrific, what the attacks that it faced, but it managed to defend itself in ways that had not been seen before, right? And I think
exactly, yeah. I'm not only that,
hold on. Palestine, well, not anymore, because probably Syria's taking that place now. But Palestine was maybe bottom of the pile in terms of strength of resistance.
There is some truth to that, yeah.
But not anymore. It's starting to become as strong as all the others, and these are all linked. Like you're talking about Lebanon and Iran and Palestine and Syria, all these nations that are linked at the moment, in Iraq, they're all linked by a couple of things, aren't they? And one of them's US aggression, and the other's self-determination, right? But
I mean, they're all victims of imperialism.
Exactly.
Even Yemen.
But victims of imperialism, right? Hold on. That's why this sort of video is very important for people to watch, because what you're seeing now, right? This video could have been filmed in 17s whatever, right? And it could have been filmed in whatever place in the Caribbean, and it could be the British raiding a Spanish ship or whatever. whatever example of imperialism you want to pull out of imperialist history since the 1600s or whenever capitalism became the main economic system in Europe. But this idea that like a ship can sail up to another ship and steal the contents of it, that's nothing new. That's how imperialism has operated for 400 years, right? I think it's good that we've got cameras these days to see it, because back in 1600s, the British Empire could just write whatever it wanted, couldn't it?
Indeed, yeah. And honestly, the Axis of Resistance in the region is the personification or the manifestation of the will of the people of that region, their will and desire for self-determination and real development. As if you have a look at the logo of Ansarullah in Yemen, the Yemeni faction of the Axis of Resistance, in their logo there's a shaft of wheat, which symbolizes development. Which symbolizes real self-sufficient development.
And when you're talking about real development, right, you're not talking about anything scary. You're talking about the things that Westerners have already, right? The people in Yemen just want to be able to like watch Man United and whatever everybody else does in the world, right?
They want to have a comfortable life. They want to have a prosperous life, a prosperous country where they can all achieve where they can achieve their dreams and where they can achieve their potential.
Exactly. Look at this picture that I've paused this video on at the minute. I paused it at the right spot. This has been doing the rounds on Twitter. Some people have been sharing this picture. Look at these.
Oh yeah, because the Americans jaw dropped.
Yeah. Look at these bootlickers. Can't believe it.
They're like, hold on, these Iranians dare to stand up to us?
Exactly. Just imagine the British Empire doing that. Like, it's the same face. It's the same shit, right? Anyway, let's move on to, you mentioned it there, Syria, because this can transition us into talking about China as well, right? So I saw this week on, you might think it was today, she had a
phone conversation with Assad, yeah.
Right, okay.
And I think that China realizes now that I think that China observes now that Syria really has stood back up on its feet now, and that they can be a reliable partner in the Belt and Road Initiative and also in security cooperation, etc. Because the type of investments that the PRC do, they depend on a stable country. Because obviously it's like a win-win situation kind of deal, and they don't want to pour huge amounts of investment and reconstruction and not guarantee that country won't fall into the US camp and all that can be undone or used against them even.
Or just blown up in some airstrike.
Yeah, indeed. And Assad also congratulates the achievements of socialism with Chinese characteristics. He also mentioned that we should learn from China's method of standing up on their feet and development. And yeah, honestly, I'm really optimistic to.
Assad said this.
I'm really optimistic towards the future, because I think China right now is taking a more not daring, but they are starting to see that the formation of the Axis of Resistance and really its crystallization and really them setting their foot in the arena. This makes China kind of confident in them, so only after that they can start to have real relations, such as that $400 billion deal that was signed with Iran. Also we have to pay attention to what happens during the American JCPOA talks with Iran, or the Vienna talks, because that also is a key shifting point. I think that's how you call it, because there are three main points that happen in this region affecting the conflict. Basically, you have Syria, and Syria is almost guaranteed because they're almost getting rid of the civil war now. Then you have Yemen, and then you have the Iranian nuclear deal.
Right.
We're going to have to see what happens with the Iranian nuclear deal, but honestly, I don't think that the Americans have much leverage anymore, because they don't really have a grip on the region as they did 10 years ago, for example.
Mm-hmm. And everybody knows what the alternative is, right? And there's a way to stop that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And yeah, that's pretty much that's it for the past 10 days, I think.
Right. Anybody got any questions on... I've got a question for you on Iran. Anybody else got any questions for Sammy on any of the topics discussed? I want to know, what does Iran and other countries in the Middle East, you know, when they're doing diplomacy with the US, what are their stances usually? Is it literally just like, just leave us alone, that's all we want? We're happy to do business with you, but we're not interested in, you know, bowing down to you. Just leave.
I'd say with Iran that definitely is the case. With Rouhani, the previous president, he was kind of like more open to the West, I would say. Like, yeah, we can do business. Might be able to do some negotiations to get rid of sanctions and stuff. But the new government with Ibrahim Raisi, I think they are more daring, so to speak, and they're like, yes, we are down to do business, but we definitely won't bow down to whatever you have to say, honestly,
we're not doing East India Company business, right? It's
absolutely
on a mutual level. Yeah. I mean, Putin kind of shown the world that that's possible, hasn't he? I guess.
Yeah. And honestly, like, I also think the Iranians want to, like, balance their relations between East and West pretty much. They don't want to be too dependent on one side, even though like China provides win-win cooperation deals. The Iranians don't want to have all their economic reliance on that. They still want to seek like deals with Africa, deals with Europe, deals with even North America, but like on the condition that it assures mutual development and win-win cooperation, and it doesn't involve any kind of submission or unfair conditions, so to speak.
Yeah. Do you know what it reminds me of? The way that the world is going geopolitically right now. It reminds me of like the non-aligned movement during the last Cold War. It's almost like well, China was part of that, right? It's almost like that has that spirit of not going toe to toe with the US, but just carrying on with your own shit, right? Just sort of blocks him. It just blocks imperialists out. That's why you see the US baiting. You know, they're always baiting, aren't they? The US has always wanted. They'll never start the war because they can't do that. Because if they start the war, then their public at home are like, well, we don't back that war because you started it, right? In the West, in the imperialist core, the war has to be started by the enemy. That's why you have the Gulf of Tonkin and, you know, incubator babies and Colin Powell, who's now in hell with his vial of white dust or whatever it was. Probably his cocaine, his own cocaine for later on, whatever it was.
Oh yeah, the cocaine they presented at the UN saying, oh, this is the anthrax that the Iraqis have and whatever.
The imperialists can only start a war by deception, right? They have to convince their own, because otherwise everybody's going to take the side of the Russians or whatever, because they're not the aggressor, right? So
yeah, I mean, like having your own population in line with your policies is the first thing that they need to make sure of.
Well, yeah, because they turn up at your door with pitchforks otherwise, don't they? It's classic, like Cecil Rhodes British imperialism to keep them away from your manor gates at home. You give them a couple more breadcrumbs and people out on the fringes of the core, right? You could cut an Indian's hand off, but you ain't cutting British's hands off. You just made them live in bedsits, right? It's that. But I think what we're seeing, this defence from imperialist countries, and I think it comes from countries like Cuba. I don't think it's strictly about socialism, right? Because socialism just makes it stronger, because that it's a political system which seems to get mass support from citizens that live underneath it. I wonder why, right? But being anti-imperialist in the sense that like you are making sure that your country is food secure, making sure that your country is money is not tied to no scam on Wall Street or whatever, money sovereignty, right? And making sure that your politics isn't influenced by the imperial core. I think that just doing those three things, whether you're socialist or not, breeds a ground for the destruction of imperialism, doesn't it? Because you just can't get in. It literally can't get in. Just like you see, I mean, it literally can't get in. You have Venezuelan cosplayers trying to get into the presidential palace to declare themselves president, right? And you can't even climb over the gate because the policemen, who in the West would be the imperialist foot soldier, the police in Venezuela are like beating Guaido off from the fence, weren't they? Like, get back with, down on the dirt. That's the difference of the world, and it just can't be beaten. When you have a country that's like that, there is no stopping it. Whether it's a country like China, which, like you say, the fact that China's around enables all these other places to do it. But countries like Cuba, if Cuba, that's only 20 miles off the coast of Florida or however far it is, can survive, and the DPRK as well. The DPRK is another good example. The DPRK that's got American nukes on like the other side of a hill on its own patch, like, right? Do you know what I mean? If these countries can survive in the face of US boot, then so can anyone, right? You've just got to follow that example. And why wouldn't countries? This is the problem with Westerners today, isn't it? You see Westerners, this is imperialist, that's imperialist. It's not. It doesn't. This is why I said to you, it doesn't matter what you think about Iran on a societal level. That it has a right to exist as a country. It's one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, right? Persians. They have a right to exist, and they'll get there in the end, right? But they won't if you threaten them with sanctions, nukes, fascists, whatever. That's what it's all about. Anyway, has anybody else got anything they want to say on the Middle East topic?
Nothing from me, no. You covered it very well.
Nice.
As always.
Apologies if my talking was a little bit all over the place, but I'm just feeling a little bit energetic because I just got back from being outside in the freezing cold.
It's all good.
Yeah, I mean, it's all good. Andre, you got anything you want to add to this discussion?
No, I'm taking in the knowledge. Usually, if I find myself outside of my wheelhouse or I have nothing edifying to add, I'll just hold my corner.
Nice, and I'm glad you actually said that, Sammy, Andre, because that's a credit to you, Sammy, because every time we have a guest on and we have our section on the quote so-called Middle East, right, a guest will say something like that. It's a credit to your work on the area, Sammy. So thanks.
It's my pleasure, honestly. I just love. It's just something that I love, honestly, telling people about. This.
It's criminally underrated in the West, if not completely lied about. Right? That's the scale of Middle East news.
Yeah,
you never get anything positive from these groups.
Like, for example, when
Vice.
When Vice did an episode on Yemen, and they were saying, there's a humanitarian crisis there. I mean, yeah, there is a humanitarian crisis, but they were painting it as if it's it's just because of the war. Like, all these people are fighting, and this fighting is stupid. It should be over.
They did that about Iraq and Syria as well.
Yeah, they completely overlook the fact that what is happening is people who organized through popular committees in cooperation with their military to defend their land against Saudi aggression, because the Saudis lost the grip on Yemen, and that basically Saudi's puppets couldn't regain control of Yemen since 2015. And it is a true act of self-determination. And like this kind of like media, so-called unbiased or what's it called, like neutral. Yeah, this so-called there's nothing called. There's no such thing as being neutral when it comes to journalism. You're either with the oppressed or against them. Honestly,
Right.
if you paint yourself as being neutral and saying, "Oh, all this fighting is dumb. People keep fighting, and the people suffer in the end," like honestly, you're just putting yourself on the side of the aggressor in this case, because in effect, you are fighting against you are making more difficult, if not fighting against the people who are trying to break their chains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially in cases of war, I guess. A journalist in war has a duty who's on the ground has a duty to just show what's going on, right? Not to twist it into, I don't know why this is going on. Like you're there, you know exactly why it's going on. It's like that, it's like that footage of BBC in Syria, and the ambulance has got an ISIS flag just up in the back of the ambulance, like, and they're just there as if you're not just telling on yourself completely. No. It's not an ambulance, is it? That's an ISIS ambulance. And it's just on the 6 o'clock news, and nobody notices, right? James says, hold on, Jamie in the chat says, what's Artsy painting tonight? It's a cityscape, Bob Ross future, full communist look into the future. That's what it is. And at the minute, I'm getting like do you know that bit in Star Wars with the Sky City? I'm getting that vibe.
I'm gonna hop off and have a nice, lovely, warm shower.
All right, Sammy. Thanks. That's too much information, but thanks as always.
Anytime. It's always a pleasure to be on.
You're in
Where is
Norway.
Tom, by the way? Is he still asleep?
Probably. You're in Norway, right? You shouldn't be getting in like a sauna or something, or jumping in like a freezing cold lake and.
I'll probably be doing that tomorrow.
Nice. Well, enjoy.
Hopefully I will. Yeah. Hopefully I don't get a cold shock or whatever it's called, a heart attack from the cold water.
Go on, Sam. Harrison, what did you say?
I just said, is he coming back? Was that it?
Yeah.
I'm coming back because I'm not in Norway forever.
Okay. No. On the podcast, mate.
On the show after you've been. Who knows? Sammy, you decide. Get yourself off.
Sammy, man.
Get yourself off.
All right.
Right.
See you later, everyone.
See you later. So anyway, let's talk about the other big news this week that's been going on. Climate change, right? That's the hot topic at the minute. We published an article this week. This looks terrible on stream, but there you go. We did a show last week impromptu when Esha wasn't here, and we just read some of she's speeches and kind of discussed them, and we found this one that was from way back in 2013. There's a lot of frankly bullshit on Twitter at the minute, and not just on Twitter, I guess, at COP26, which we'll get into later. Lies and stuff about, China's. They fudge the numbers, basically, right? That's basically what's going on. And we published an article. If you've not read yet, go and read. It's a speech from Xi Jinping, and he lays out basically what COP26 should be. Should have been at like COP1 or whatever. They shouldn't have had 26 meetings on this. They should have decided what to do at one and then just done it. Basically, he talks about how climate change should be solved via making sure that we don't ruin the planet for economic means, right? Which is spot on. Basically, doing that would solve everything. But yeah, here we are, 26 COP meetings later, and China's still getting smeared. But anyway, here are some of the achievements and goals that China set out. They have a target of achieving peak emissions by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. Now this one gets, with China news, they like, something can be good, but the Western media can twist it into being all really evil, right? Like when China mass-produced caviar, right? And then its status as a luxury product. Exactly. Well,
made
this
it
is one of
cheaper.
those. Yeah, exactly. This is one of those because China said 2060 and the West have said 2050. The West now has 10 years on China, right? So they're doing this smear that China's not doing enough, right? That's the idea. We'll see if the West has managed to stick to any of these figures by 2050.
So, like when Canada said,
I find all of that as a Canadian, I find all of this very interesting. And by interesting, I mean hilarious. That we Canadians are getting on China's ass for producing too much carbon output as they manufacture products for our consumption that we sent over there for them to make. And as far as per capita carbon producers, we are literally the worst in the entire world.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Since 1850, I think Canada's at the top, even above America per capita, despite saying that China should emit less greenhouse gases when producing goods.
And this is, don't forget, this is producing Canada's goods as well.
Yeah, exactly. But also, we'll probably go on briefly later, but it ties into the import expo that China just ran, where one of the three moors for the expo that kind of companies had to show if they were allowed to attend was to kind of commit to China's carbon targets and to be more green. So they are actually doing that, and Canada actually had 64 businesses there, so they know that as well. So it is obviously just PR that they're releasing that statement.
I mean, businesses will always say one thing and do another, which is like Elon Musk, right? He'll go on Twitter and tweet about authoritarianism bad whilst doing business in China, right? And making profit there. I think China set this goal of 2060 as a realistic goal, right? Because they were like, no, look, 2060 means we've got enough time, such and such happens or whatever, right? It's a realistic goal. And if they make it, we can only judge them by 2060. That's what they've set. The West, everybody, you know the West's goal of 2050 is just hype. We'll be 2045 and it'll be okay. We've got to bump it up another 5 years, right? But anyway, the China's goal of 2060 is the highest reduction intensity in the shortest time, in comparison to the size of China, right? And don't forget that includes producing everything for Canada, the US, the UK, Europe, wherever in the world that China already is the factory for. A lot of Western numbers, like I say at the start of the show, are fudged because the factories have moved to China. The alternate is Britain, the US, whatever, looks like it did in 1900s when there was factories bellowing smoke out everywhere, right? The reason why that's not happening is because the imperialists moved their factories to the third world to do that so they could continue polluting and saving money. China again treats the Paris Agreement seriously, which is what Trump decided to walk away from, right? The thing about the US is they will never ratify or sign up to anything that they can actually be legally held accountable to internationally. They will never join anything or like the Geneva Convention. They've still not ratified because they're just like, no, fuck it, we need to be able to do what we want. So anyway, China's one of the only countries of the world that's like, well, not one of the only countries, one of the only big countries in the world that is pushing for the Paris Agreement to be finalised, which is, the aims of things like COP 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, right? However long we're going to be here. As opposed to China, who is putting their foot down and being like, look, we've got our plan. It's time for you to set yours. They have planned their own nationally determined contribution of carbon emission targets, and they have a detailed roadmap and plans to achieve them. And the West doesn't have anything. They just get told. It's like they enjoy getting told off by Greta Thunberg, isn't it? Like as if they can be like, oh, isn't she cute, telling us off. Very strange. China's released a comprehensive document on the country's path to carbon neutrality. They've banned new oil refining and other polluting means of energy and such. They've invested nationwide in green energy solutions. It's all about green technology there at the minute. It's incentivized to businesses. It's also incentivized to town and provincial planners, and their aim is the most economic growth in exchange for the smallest level of energy input, which is an admirable goal, right? That should be the least that humanity is trying to achieve. Try telling that to a capitalist. They've already reduced energy consumption by 28% nationwide, which is one of the fastest reductions in the world. They're leading the world in green technology, design, efficiency and production. Other energy methods like nuclear fusion, which is energy from water basically. We have an article on that if you click that link on that one. And solar paneling. Also, they have the highest reforestation and the greening of the desert figures in the entire world in the last decade alone. That's the time in between now and when she gave this speech, pretty much. They have the highest growth of forest coverage and the largest areas of man-made reforestation in the world. They ended the monopoly of high polluting modes of transport as well. So with the nationwide high speed rail service, and they basically eliminated the need for anybody in China to get a flight anywhere. You could just get on the high speed rail, which is a maglev train, and runs a lot greener than a plane and all the plane fuel that it burns. They have entire city transport infrastructure that's electric. They are the leading designers of electric buses, I believe, in the world, and are selling them to other countries around the world nowadays. They are the leading global development of green agricultural technology, and that relates to the reforestation, etc., as well, because now they've turned desert into farmland. So not only creating more green space and reducing carbon, but also using it to produce food in the way that nature wants food to be produced, right? Just outside. They've also set food wastage policy, which at the time the BBC tried to smear as authoritarian, right? What was it called? She's like no wastage policy, that you shouldn't order more than you want in a restaurant.
Yeah. Acting as if you'll go to jail if you throw food away.
Yeah, exactly. Stopped. I mean, it's weird though, isn't it, how they can do this? Because we in the West have plenty of campaigns about food wastage, right? And using and recycling and all these green energy methods that are passed on to the citizen. But when China does it by suggesting you shouldn't order more than you want to eat in a restaurant, right? And that could save quite a lot of wastage. And not just that, it's not just the food wastage, is it? It's the input to get to that, the space that has to be farmed for the cow, for the beef that you've ordered, etc., etc. It's a chain, isn't it? But the West has the same schemes, but it's not dubbed as authoritarian, right? It's very strange how they get away with this. Anyway, in reference to what Andre was saying about China being the factory of Canada almost, China refused to stop being the rubbish and recycling plant of the world as well, which annoyed developing nations about 2 years ago. They stopped accepting shipments of rubbish. Now countries have to deal with it themselves, which is fair enough, right? They're also
sorry.
Go on. No, go on.
No, I was going to say that. It's not just China that had to deal with our inability to process waste and deal with manufacturing and supply chain problems. Mm-hmm. It's actually a problem in the South Pacific. Like there's been a return, not once but multiple times, where the Philippines have sent us back recycling that they told us they were not going to be able to process, and we sent it over there anyway.
Yeah.
if we end up getting told off by Rodrigo Duterte, he's got a better line on environmentalism than we do. We ought to be fucking embarrassed, and yet we still believe we have the ability to take a moral high position to China on that matter. And where it comes to manufacturing, we've been talking about trade deficits with China. We've been talking about the necessity of bringing manufacturing back home. We've been talking about these things for the last probably 12 or 13 years, and yet there is no. Okay, for example, like the polysilica factories that are required to make solar panels. That's all done in China, and not only have we offloaded the responsibility for creating the green economy that the Canadian government's been promising to its constituents for the past decade and a half, but there's been a bit of a wrinkle in the plan for rolling out these solar panel farms, and that's that they're saying that the polysilica factories are staffed by forced labor employees. That is, Uyghurs from Xinjiang are being shunted into these factories and forced to work. Now, they don't say what the amount of the labor is worth. They just say that it's forced labor. And what essentially we've done, there was actually a CBC article and an evening news segment that aired talking about laborers from Zhejiang, forced laborers, of course, because there's no labor that takes place in the autonomous region, or that takes place at the hands of a laborer who happens to be of Uyghur background. The only way that can ever happen is it being forced. They were saying that the manufacture of tomato paste, because much of it originates within the Xinjiang Autonomous Province, that it must therefore be forced labor. So, on the one hand, we want to be able to meet our Paris climate targets, but on the other hand, our hands are just tied because we can't seem to get forced labor out of the supply chain. Meanwhile, there's never been any proof that any of this labor is indeed forced. Oftentimes, what simply happens is that if workers who are Uyghur are, let's say, if they end up moving to a different province to take on labor, or if a factory opens up or a farm opens up within the province and it's staffed with people that are of Uyghur background, we automatically labor it forced. And the funny part about that is that probably about 14, 15 years ago, we joined the United States and telling the Chinese government that they need to stop discriminating against Uyghur workers because they can't find jobs. You're not willing to give them jobs. Of course, they're going to be around in poverty, and of course, they're going to gravitate towards extremism because you're not giving them the chance to, share in the massive economic boon that you've been able to provide for the rest of your Han citizens. If you would just stop being Han supremacists, maybe they would be able to integrate into your society. And now that they've integrated, it's like, no, you should actually kick them out of the supply chain all over again because you're doing a little bit too well.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. This is what I mean. The capitalists will... It's like Nike are happy to be labelled a slaver over some story in China, right? But I guess it hides their actual use of slaves in whatever country, like you mentioned. It's not just a China problem, is it? It's more just that China resists it.
The number of Canadian mining interests on the African continent that have had documented instances of slave and forced labor ought to be embarrassing to any country that calls itself a first world power. And yet, the only time that we ever seem to get worked up about, I shouldn't even have to go to the African continent to find evidence of this. Right in Leamington, Ontario, which is like the tomato capital of Canada, on multiple occasions have, farms and farm owners been accused of holding migrant workers hostage, i.e. not letting them leave the country, for example, and go back to Jamaica or Grenada or wherever it was that they migrated from to do work here, because it was going to end up leaving them short-staffed during the COVID crisis. So they were holding their passports hostage. So we had our own farmers literally engaging in forced labor, and yet the only time that we ever seem to get worked up enough to do something about it is when we not only I can't even say suspect, but when we have been told by Adrian Zenz or the Australian Strategic Policy Institute that China is engaging in forced labor.
I mean, not only that, your neighbours have it written into their founding document that slavery is allowed to happen. So it's kind of weird, isn't it, that we're going to go on about it, but it's enshrined into like foundational documents of the nations that are calling it out.
Yeah, it's
Go on,
literally legal in the United States to pay disabled people below minimum wage. So anybody with diagnosed autism or anything like that, they're able to pay below the minimum wage, which is still $7.25. So it's pretty rich hearing, Western nations talk about forced labor when 2.5 million prisoners exist here, and many of them are forced to produce uniforms for McDonald's, for cents on the dollar. So, yeah.
And it was the same in the UK as well with Brexit. Some of the unions in the UK, the workplace unions, some of their arguments for leaving the EU were against exactly what Andre mentioned, that was fruit picking companies in Britain being able to basically capture European migrant workers, paying them like 10 quid a day, making them work 15 hours a day, making them live in a bed sit with 20 other workers, taking their passports off them, etc., etc. And one of the arguments for leaving was that would stop the access for that, right? Which is true. It's happening. It's happening.
I just wanted to add on RT Marxist's point, which is that until 2014, employers were paying disabled workers $1.25 an hour.
Wow.
It actually, the practice ended because a lady from St. Catharines, Terry Lynn Gary, sued for lost wages against a company that she'd worked for over 10 years. It was a packaging company. And she ended up getting $142,124 in lost wages, $19,613 in lost income for discriminatory termination, i.e., when she asked to be paid more, they just said get the fuck out, and $25,000 in damages. Because they were paying her for 10 years $1.25 an hour.
That's crazy. It's crazy. I'm not sure what I mean. Someone will probably tell us in the chat. I don't think the UK has ever been that discriminated. I mean, it probably has, not in recent history, though. I'm talking about recent history. Every day, something about the US new comes out and just surprises me. Artsy, it looks like you're going to say something.
Nope, I'm disagreeing with y'all. That's absolutely
you're frozen in the top. Ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
The UK is a bit more discreet in the way it does it, like with the universal credit system and things like that, like forcing, just as an example, like trans people in the UK, for example, in order to get universal credits, they're basically forced to present as their desired gender is the language used, like apply for jobs and go to interviews presenting as that gender and things like that. I think the UK is not as overt with it, but definitely kind of the Tories, especially of late, are clamping kind of down on the universal credit system and things like that.
I mean, I don't know about the UK's benefit system. It's gone downhill, hasn't it, since the entire West has. Right, before we carry on, you wanted to talk about this she quotes, right, from this keynote speech.
Yeah, it's not too important, really, actually.
Well, let's have a look, because I've got it up.
Yeah.
So let's have a look.
Just the kind of international import-export, as I touched on earlier. Just kind of the key speeches from...
What is this,
key quotes from that. What is what, sorry?
Do you know the background of this conference? Is
this
Go on.
Basically, businesses go to China, and it's kind of lots of different representatives from around the world will kind of showcase their products and kind of discuss how they can kind of have a relationship with China, basically. So it's kind of
right, okay.
a look into into trade, I guess, and kind of how those countries and businesses will approach that. But I know this year it was heavily focused on green, becoming green, more green, and businesses having to commit to China's kind of carbon goals and things like that. Also, just I think the last quote's the only one that's like indicative of any policy.
This one's quite good. I mean, this is the whole. This ties into the neutral by 2060, and this is why I personally have faith in them sticking to that goal and making it. China is a firm believer in honouring its words with actions. The measures I have announced at the third CIIE for further opening up have mostly been implemented. Now, I mean, I don't know what the context of that speech is, but I do know that in comparison to the article that we published, which is a speech from 2013, things like this prove that right. Everything with the way that China works, whether you agree with that policy or not, right? It always seems to get spoke about, and then you'll see it being implemented right the way through, right? It's not like the West where, pardon me, it's not like the West where Americans are still waiting for their COVID promise. That was, what did Kamala Harris call it? She said it's a basic need. She owes America. She said she would pay Americans $2,000 a month, and that was an election pledge. Just forgotten about, isn't it? Is no anybody demanding it? Don't think they are. But the difference with China is that they stick to it, don't they? And in terms of climate change, they do seem to be sticking to it. Go on, what's this last quote?
Yeah, so that is just... Let me get it up, I can't read it on there. Yeah, so kind of just... Because also another thing about this conference was speaking about how COVID measures can be implemented as well, and just kind of relationships between countries and kind of a... What's the word I'm trying to think of? Not globalized, a good relationship. I can't think of the word right now, but I'll just read this quote. So, the going may be tough when one walks alone, but it gets easier when people walk together. As the pandemic continues to wreak havoc and the global economy faces a bumpy recovery, it is all the more imperative that people around the world pull together to tide over this difficult time. So yeah, just a nice quote there, and kind of indicative of a lot of China's win-win kind of policies, especially with developing countries during COVID. So yeah.
I mean, that makes sense, not just to COVID or not just to China, but I mean, that's a perfect explanation on anti-imperialism, isn't it? And I think what Sammy was talking about earlier when he's talking about how China's enabled these other countries to sort of stand up for themselves and actually win this time, right? Because they're not walking alone, because they know that they've got economic ties with China, right? And in some cases military ones, especially countries like Russia, right? But quotes like that are good, but the difference with China and the West making that quote is that China will actually carry out that, right? Unlike the West. Here we go. Joe Biden at COP26 this week said that Xi Jinping makes a big mistake by not showing up at COP26, right? That was what Joe Biden said. There's a reason that we tweeted about this. There's a reason why Xi Jinping doesn't leave to meetings. And again, it's another example of how easy it is for these sort of China watcher hawks, propagandists to just spin anything into China bad, right? Xi doesn't leave China. They all think it's because he's scared of meeting.
Can I sort of like interject?
Of course, Vito. Go on.
Yeah. Hi. My name is Vito. So when COP26 before COP26 was a thing, there was already like reports from that the global the leaders are all flying private jets that
yeah
like practically would have emitted a lot more fossil fuel burning than the rest of the people who just got into plane like the normal flight planes from
civilian flights, right?
Yeah, civilian flights. And like after the COP26, there's like a staff member from the Biden administration that was positive with COVID. So Joe Biden came out negative, but he was able to get back to from Glasgow to Washington.
I didn't know this.
Some of the staff were like have to stay behind. So not only it's really unfortunate, but it's also really just underlying how much Biden would take the whole climate change seriously when it's not only just him who would like take a more sacrifice in like just to go from Washington to Glasgow and then back and forth.
Well, the point is, it's not even that though, right?
Yeah, it's not even that. It's more about like how noble they are with like using investing in more green energies, but also do another things, which is paid like having a bit of a lobbyist doing a bit of like having lobbyists to pay like to sort of like under selling how much not underselling, but they're saying Biden's saying one thing, but then taking lobbyist money for oils and grills and like practically in the first months of his presidency, because one of his promises would be like fighting climate change and also not doing things that are destructive to the environment. But then he sort of like opened up several mining and drills that is practically destroying the environment. One of the things that is funny like right now is that not funny but it's like really tragic as well, because I'm not sure if you been on the case about the human rights lawyer Steven Donziger. I think Andre did about this. The who sued Chevron for practically doing oil drill and destroying the Amazon forest in Ecuador, and then and now he was like being imprisoned for
trying to hold him accountable.
For holding them accountable. Well, Donziger won the case, but he's still getting imprisoned. So that really says about like how just there's a bit of meaningless gestures from the Biden administration.
Well, of course. Of course. Yeah. But this whole idea that Xi Jinping isn't there as if it's some sort of like he doesn't dare meet the West is a load of shit, right? If he was to travel outside China, he's got to quarantine for 2 weeks at least when he comes back. That's the rules for every Chinese citizen, right? You've got to go into quarantine and be swabbed once or twice a day and tested and live in isolation for 2. Why would you go and do that for Joe Biden to sleep through your speech like you can see on screen now? Or whatever. What's the point in going to this? It like COP26, like I said at the start of the show, this should have been solved at COP1 or possibly COP2, just to iron out any other differences. But not like every year, so Greta Thunberg can come and have a photo shoot and.
It's not like okay. Because Greta Thunberg also thinks that the COP26 was a bit of a waste of time herself. Like, she practically just said that I'm rephrasing what she talked about COP26, which is like, which is a bit of an arse, like something like that, because it's just, you know, she might have had this realization that it doesn't like the whole thing was not like a conference to actually fight climate change, but it's just, you know, a billionaire like leaders, just the global north rich countries, the leaders from the global north rich countries just saying they would, you know, they would fight climate change by pouring money into the problem, but
they come up with everybody will have like a green shower by whatever. It's just weird virtue singles.
And then Greta just dropped F-bombs demanding more climate actions, you know, as Biden appears to like Biden just fell asleep during the conference, which is saying a lot about the whole fiasco with, you know, with the whole climate, like the whole conversation about climate, and
it shouldn't be a conversation, should it? It should be, what we should be doing is following the example of China and other countries that are taking a real effort to fight climate change. Comes through. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? Because Westerners think that their politicians are doing something, but are happy to just not let them do something. Why? What is it with Western people where we're so, you know, blasé when it comes to demanding they actually do something? And why are we so easy to be misled? And when we can see that other countries around the world with our own eyes, if we just look at it, are doing something like the conference that Harrison was talking about, that's to do with doing business in China, and these are like for top businesses. It's not just like, oh, I want to start selling, I just want to open a shop in China kind of businesses. It's like the world's biggest companies. Like Elon Musk will attend conferences like that, right? And he will abide by the rules because, as all capitalists do, they understand that like profit is better than no profit, right? It might not like being told what to do, but he will still do it because he's got no other way to access that market of 1.4 billion people, or however many, you know, whatever population is at that given point. But conferences like that, they're not done just to sort of trick Westerners and be like, look, China is, you know, that conference doesn't even get reported about in the West. But that's how that's how climate change is being fought on the ground in 2021, 10 years away, 8 years since you first made the speeches about, you know, outlining your plans for the up until 2060. You know, China chose that date in 13, and they've stuck to it since and have made no changes. The West seems to come up with a new solution or liberal cause to get behind in terms of climate change over and over again. Now, there are a lot of people out there, aren't there, that say Greta Thunberg is some sort of like shill for the establishment. But at the same time, like you said then, there are moments where she's like, yeah, this is, you know, this COP thing is just like a virtue signal, isn't it? Nothing.
I will say that I don't know. People do say that Greta Thunberg is you know, like an op, or is like an establishment shill. I think sometimes especially when it comes from the conservatives, it's off base because they're just looking to dismiss anybody who, and anybody who has educated opinions about climate change and is willing to act on them.
No,
their immediate response is to dismiss them. But Thunberg is also she was also featured in a documentary with David Attenborough and with several organizations that have long pushed this myth that the Earth is overpopulated and that the key to to avoiding climate disaster is to have less children. And this sort of eco-fascist strain of thought, I wouldn't say originated, but was popularized in the 20th century by Paul Ehrlich's book, The Population Bomb. And that book was explicitly fascist. I mean, Ehrlich makes the case. I mean, both Ehrlich and his wife are some incredibly vile people, but in the book, Ehrlich makes the case that during the time that India and Ethiopia were experiencing famines, that the best thing to do would just be to let people starve. I mean, this may be the natural order of things. If we were to try and feed all of these useless eaters, we're going to, use up all of the world's resources. And you still see that strain of thought being exercised when people talk about, for example, overpopulation on the African continent. That Bill Gates believes that the key to combating climate change and combating lack of resources, avoiding famines, sustainable development, etc., is to teach family planning to people in sub-Saharan Africa. Thunberg has been featured in multiple videos along with Attenborough, and I forget what the name of the organization was that promotes population control. But she's been right along with that line, and many of her colleagues, young people who are environmental and climate activists, were critical of Evo Morales' government in Bolivia when they were saying prior to the coup that he was allowing the rainforest, the Amazon forest fires to burn out of control because he wanted to get indigenous people off of their land in order to appropriate more of it for corporate control, and which would also contribute to climate change. Morales himself being an indigenous Bolivian, but there are legitimate ties between her and, I would say, like eco-fascist thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, I've just got Yeltsin on the screen. It's horrible. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Is it more though that she is? People calling her up are completely wrong, right? Is it more that the climate change movement under capitalism is by default any climate change movement, right, that is not led by socialism under capitalism is going to invariably fall into fascist train of thought.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, all you have to do is take one look at the undisciplined dipshits that organize themselves and call themselves Extinction Rebellion. Mm-hmm. And some of the weird shit that they do, like going to train stations that are populated by working class people.
It's a brilliant video.
and holding up their trains to be able to get their asses to work. Meanwhile, Canary Wharf is fucking empty. Not one of them thought of going to like the business district of London and inconveniencing their day. Yes, when combating climate change or any sort of environmentalist movement is led by people that don't discipline themselves through a socialist ideology, haven't filtered their views through Marxist dialectic, then yeah, you get completely disorganized, and in many cases like a counterproductive organizational work.
Any capitalist criticism of capitalism generally falls into fascism, right? That's kind of what fascism is, right? Economically. So I get what you're saying. I think my point on Thunberg was that she isn't a shill. It's just that she was seen as... I mean, you explained what she is. I think that she is that, right? And the fact that... I think
she's, in many ways, she's a mouthpiece for her parents' points of view. I think a lot of which... Yeah. But, what she was saying when she was younger was her parents, her parents were... her lips were moving, but it was her parents' words coming out.
Yeah, of course. As any child generally is, right? That's a given. I think what I'm trying to say, though, is the world leaders are happy to to have her take the limelight because of exactly what she represents, like you explained, isn't socialist, right? She's a good distraction from the socialist answer to climate change. I mean, you mentioned Extinction Rebellion then. Last year in the UK, the Communist Youth Party, I think what they called, the Youth Communist Party of Britain, right? YCL or whatever, Communist League. They went to an Extinction Rebellion march with a banner that said socialism or barbarism, right? Which is that's the only way that climate change is going to be solved, is through socialist means, just like what Xi Jinping talks about, right? But the Extinction Rebellion then put out a tweet being like, oh, there's been a picture of a socialist banner at one of our marches. We're definitely not socialists. We don't adhere to any political ideology. Okay, so you're fascists then, basically telling on yourselves. But the fact that they had to rush out to put this tweet out, I mean, you're right, it's eco-fascist, isn't it?
It is, yeah. In the sense that I think a lot of people don't really understand what ecofascism is, and assume that it just means fascists with environmentalist tendencies. No, what that is hiding imperialism behind the veneer of environmental concerns, such that, for example, we believe that lithium mining holds the key to our future of sustainable development, because we want to have, for example, vehicles powering possibly even homes, streetlights, etc., with rechargeable batteries. So you have a manifesto put out in the United States called the Green New Deal, and in Canada called the LEAP Manifesto, and there's a conversation about how it is that we can more sustainably consume energy, but not a conversation about where the raw materials for that energy consumption is coming from. So we would continue the same extractive tactics, the same imperialist methods of exercising power over the global south. Mm-hmm. We're not going to change anything about that. We're simply going to change what we do to consume energy.
Well, that's why we're at COP26, and because it's exactly that, right? What the US
that's pretty much it. Like, I don't know if you saw a picture of our Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, sitting around a table with, a bunch of corporate puppet masters. All of them were just white men from Canada, the United States, Europe, etc. You don't see anybody represented from the global south around this table, and it actually reminded me of the woodcut art from the Berlin conference, where essentially, like, European powers met to figure out how they were going to carve up the continent of Africa.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like every NATO summit that is that have those peoples from the West, like the.
There's an article, isn't there? I've seen an article going around saying, is COP26 like too white? I mean, yes. It's basically all the. When I see this term white, to me it means the countries of the 8 Nation Alliance, right? The White Army that fought against the Bolshevik Revolution, the true enemies of the working class of the world, right? Whiteness. It's exactly that, because it's the East. It's all the imperialist powers that are deciding what's going on, and their solutions for climate change, inevitably are eco-fascism. Because how does capitalism solve any contradiction? Like I say, it's fascism. From Nazi Germany to the way that you just we'll just liquidate this village because lithium mine, right? It's no different. Yeah.
Now, I do hate to cut this short, but I've got dad duties. I've got dinner time and bath time, teeth brushing and bedtime.
It's all good. We're nearly at the end of the show anyway. So.
Okay. No, I was gonna say I really enjoyed hanging out with you all, and I've been like absolutely mesmerized watching Artsy Marxist take this from a blank canvas to what I'm looking at right now.
Yes.
I wish I was that skilled at fucking anything in my life. Like, if I had the ability to do anything as well in a short period of time as she just did this painting, I would be a wealthy man, and I would probably not be on Twitter as much.
Wow, thanks, comrade.
Exactly.
No worries, but it was great hanging out with you all, and I hope to talk to you again soon. I mean, don't be a stranger. You know where to find me.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Same. Sure. Awesome to have you. Go and do your dad
Thanks for
things.
coming on, man.
All right, Joel, take it easy.
Yeah, you take it easy too. We've got like, I don't know, 10 minutes to the show left. Anything else we've got to talk about? Let me check the articles.
I really wanna talk about this unknown things that we didn't know about, which is the opium cultivation in Myanmar, which is like
What's
interesting.
this?
So, what we didn't know about Myanmar is that they have been, planting and cultivating opium in the somewhere in Myanmar. In the one of the places that do those things was like the Kinchin State, which is like one of the areas in Myanmar.
This is going on now, right?
No, I don't know if this is like still like this is. Yeah, I still think this is like going on, but not as much as it used to before.
Right. Is this when Myanmar was Burma, right, under occupation? What historic period are we talking about here?
I think this is like from the from the beginning of the colonial era of Myanmar to which is like Burma, which is until like right now. It actually, it's been reported last year that the which assumed like the entire like a few decades ago, it would be like opium business still stay afloat until like 2020, and it's the UN Office on Drugs and Crimes stated that the Myanmar opium cultivation drop as the regional drug economy continues to evolve. That was like last year. So the whole thing was like the drop in cultivation was again significant in 2019. We will continue to work with Myanmar. Like this is like from one of the regional representatives of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. So they will continue to work with Myanmar and communities in Shan to assist the transition from opium to sustainable economic alternatives. We are also discussing options to help Kenshin given the situation and needs there. And then that's like the United Nation website, right? Here, sorry, I'll just drop in the link, and then here's the right.
Where have you put it?
I'll put it on the GAN chat, or
okay, yeah. Drop it there.
Okay.
Carry on.
So, here's one website. Here's another website from the Open Society Foundation, which is a George Soros funded organization that says that farmers in Myanmar call for justice, which is like incredible, because not because it's like those are ordinary farmers, but they are actually farmers that planted opium, and then there's like in the article it says that farmers like have to pay for a tax before he can take any profit for his family.
Right.
So I would think that this is like one of the new rules to plant to it's not like complete transition from opium, but it's like an economic it's like an economic new strategy for I think for transitioning.
Right.
But
Okay. And I'm guessing the West doesn't like this decline in opium farming now, right?
Yeah, the decline of opium. Like because before, like we talked about the whole Myanmar coup. We never ever have heard about like from me at least. I never ever have heard about like there's like a opium plantation, which is around the rural side of Myanmar. So that was like interesting.
I mean, it's the same with Afghanistan, right? I mean, that's not the headline, is it?
It's not the same with Afghanistan, but it's like, that's not the opium. That's not the article I was looking for, but I think there was like an article where it's like, where the farmers pleaded to, keep their opium operations going. They don't say it like that, but they sort of like say things like they don't want it to transition or whatever. So this is definitely like, there's one of the like at the end of the Open Society Foundation's article, as Myanmar continues its futile pursuit to eradicate drugs from the country, it is imperative that the people most vulnerable to the consequences of these unilateral policies, which is like I would think it's like the tax that they impose on the farmers, unilateral policies push back constructively in an effort to avoid further humanitarian disasters. Please don't consider us as criminals, one farmer implores. We grow opium to survive and fulfill our family's basic requirements, not to damage society. The world should heed her call. Like, this is very... like, this... Yeah, you're right. This is like Afghanistan, but...
If there's one thing the imperialists love and have loved for the last 200-300 years, it's the cultivation of opium, right?
Yeah, and it's not just like the cultivation of opium, but it's also like trading in businesses of opium. I think that sort of leaves leaves a lot of communities in the global south vulnerable to these sort of things.
Well, not only that, right? It not only does it make them economically dependent on the imperial core.
Yeah.
Well, the reason why it does that is because once you get, the British did this in India, right? They would grow whatever crop made the most profit, not what fed the people. So on land that was once farmland becomes land that grows this whatever plant makes the most money, and in some cases plants that would turn the ground sour because you would eat all the nutrients out of it, right? And then people can't grow food, so the imperialist wheel turns and turns and turns, doesn't it? Anyway, before we get to the end of the show, because we've only got a couple of minutes left, we need to cover two more topics. One of them is what she said at COP26, because like the Western media's been making out that he didn't go because he would have to quarantine, but he sent a speech to be delivered by somebody else. So let me just read this out. Bear with me. need to make sure I can use the controls on it. Here we go. Honourable Chinese President Xi Jinping issued a written statement to the United Nations COP26 Climate Summit in Glasgow, Scotland on Monday. The following is his statement as published by Xinhua News Agency. Honourable Prime Minister Boris Johnson, colleagues, it gives me great pleasure to attend. What's this? Is this Boris Johnson's speech or Xi's?
What, did I send the wrong speech?
Have you sent...
Nah, that's She's.
He was talking to Boris Johnson, was he?
Yeah, because it was in the UK.
It gives me great... Oh, right, okay, yeah. He's addressing the... It gives me great pleasure to attend the World Leaders Summit and discuss ways to address climate change. As we speak, adverse impacts of climate change have become increasingly evident, presenting a growing urgency for global action. How to respond to climate change and revive the world economy are challenges of our times that we must meet. First, we need to uphold multilateral consensus. I think that was the term you were looking for earlier, Harrison, right?
Yes, exactly.
When it comes to global challenges such as climate change, multilateralism is the right prescription. The UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and its Paris Agreement provide the fundamental legal basis for international cooperation on climate. Note the key word there, fundamental legal basis. That's the key reason why the US will do all it can to avoid the Paris Agreement. Parties need to build on existing consensus, increase mutual trust, step up cooperation, and work together to deliver a successful COP26 in Glasgow. Second, we need to focus on concrete actions. Visions will come true only when we act on them. Parties need to honour their commitments, set realistic targets and visions, and do their best according to national conditions to deliver their climate action measures. Developed countries should not only do more themselves, but should also provide support to help developing countries do better. Note, that statement alone is why the West has a problem with China, because China expects them to do more themselves for developing countries instead of just looting them. Third, we need to accelerate the green transition. It is important to harness innovations in science and technology to transform and upgrade our energy and resources sectors, as well as the industrial structure and composition pattern, promote a greener economy and society, and explore a new pathway forward that coordinates development with conservation. Colleagues, guided by the vision of a community of life for man and nature, China will continue to prioritise ecological conservation and pursue a green and low carbon path to development. We will foster a green, low carbon and circular economic system at a faster pace, press ahead with industrial structure adjustment, and rein in the irrational development of energy intensive and high emissions projects. We will speed up the transition to green and low carbon energy, vigorously develop renewable energy, and plan and build large wind and photovoltaic power stations. Recently, China released 2 directives: working guidance for carbon dioxide peaking and carbon neutrality in full, and faith implementation of the new development philosophy, and the action plan for carbon dioxide peaking before 2030. I like how he just lays the names of these policies out to the world leaders, and we're like, this is what we're doing, this is what it's called. Anyway, specific implementation plans for key areas such as energy, industry, construction and transport, and for key sectors such as coal, electricity, iron, steel and cement will be rolled out, coupled with supporting measures in terms of science and technology, carbon sink, fiscal and taxation, and financial incentives. Taken together, these measures will form a 1+N policy framework for developing carbon peak and carbon neutrality, with a clearly defined timetable, roadmap and blueprint. Ancient Chinese believe that successful governance relies on solid action. I hope all parties will take stronger actions to jointly tackle the climate challenge and protect the planet, the shared home for us all. Thank you. That was the Xi Jinping speech. I mean, my takeaway from that is that China reacts to climate change dialectically, right? And you can see that through that speech. He lays out the problems and lays out exactly what we're going to do to solve them. That's dialectical materialism, and that's China applying it on a state level and, you know, bossing the world around. Don't forget Joe Biden's at that speech falling asleep while that's being read to him. And then he has
the audacity to call Russia and China's absence as like as like a bad, it's like really bad because like they think that we need to be participating in their conference just to just to have them talking about how much climate change is important. Like it's just like talk the talk, but not really walk the line of like doing like actually combating like doing fighting climate change, but also how to keep 1.4 billion people to keep the to keep them afloat from from a lot of like.
Well, he said in that speech, didn't he? He said that there's got to be a balance, hasn't there, between making sure people are.
Because if we took a look last few months, there were like power outage because of like the decreased use of fossil fuel that led to power outage, and that unfortunately have like that resulted in like increased
there was a city recently in the mainland that didn't make its quota for when it had to turn off its coal electricity plant, right, I believe, or something like that. And the central government was like, no, we told you that like the factory had to be turned off by this date, and now it's this date, so turn the factory off. And they were like, oh well, people will have no electricity, right? And they're like, don't care, you need to turn it off because that's our environmental target. I mean, if that's the case, the central government are not at fault there. I know it's bad that people went without electricity, but if a municipal government is going to act that way, then people are going to face the consequences, because just like Xi Jinping said in the speeches, never again will we favour the economy over the environment, right? That's how we don't solve climate change by making those decisions to favour the economy. People in the chat are asking where Tom is because he's not got up. What I'll do is I'll phone him while we're finishing the show. I just want to talk about the last subject we've got. Harrison, you sent the article for this in.
I was hoping Tom would be here for this one, to be honest.
Hold on. I'll just make Artsy smaller so we can see the article. So this one.
One.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has just been going on Twitter, right?
Yeah, go on. You talk about this one.
Hold on, let me get the article up myself. Sorry, I'm not prepared.
Okay. You expected Tom
Scroll
to
down
be
a bit. Okay. No, I thought you were going to talk about the Taiwan one. One second. Right, I'm getting it up. So the first clinic for transgender children and adolescents. It's the first multidisciplinary clinic for transgender children and adolescents was set up in the Children's Hospital of Fudan, University of Shanghai. So it's a kind of a facility to safely and healthily manage transgender minors' transitions. So it's kind of obviously a big deal being the first in China, and kind of a big step forward in terms of I guess transgender rights in China and I guess Asia as a whole. So it's kind of a big step. Experts expect that the clinic, integrated with psychology, endocrine and genetic, metabolic, urology departments, among other departments, will serve as a bridge between transgender children, parents, doctors, and the various circles of society. The Global Times learned from the hospital on Thursday that the clinic was set up after the hospital had encountered many such cases in its clinical practice.
Right, okay. And I mean, this just shows that these ideas that like China is anti-LGBT and banning trans people from TV, etc., is just a load of bollocks, doesn't it? It just proves that wrong completely.
Exactly.
You can't have one thing and the other. It's not how it works. You know, it's not how it works.
Like, I mean, obviously, no one pretends that China's perfect on all progressive issues and things like that. It's a developing country still. We've got to remember. So it is kind of making strides towards that and getting better. Obviously, as the economy grows and things like that. So yeah, these people that are. What are you going to say?
Well, like I think it's really awesome. I mean, I think the difference between someone knows them and like this clinic is an example of that. And like the U.S. may claim to be a bastion of rights, but it's still totally legal in many states to fire somebody for being transgender. And there's I'm hopeful about China and the steps that they're taking, and I think it's going to set an example for other places. And I'm really happy to see it. That article yesterday made me so happy.
Yeah.
I was like,
Am I back now?
Fantastic. Yeah. So.
All right.
Yeah.
You're back.
I'm back.
I think the stream's been off for
I think
for a
it
while.
went for a minute or two. I'm guessing like a firework hit the phone exchange outside or something. I've switched to my phone because it just wasn't having it. So I do apologise for that. Artsy, I kind of caught what you were saying a little bit. But yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I was just explaining. It's all a facade with the U.S. We supposedly have protected classes. Yeah, it's bullshit.
Exactly. It's always say one thing and do another, isn't it? Whatever they're talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's have a look at this painting. I'm getting like a fantasy vibe.
Yeah, I mean, it's a communist society, right? Like, we've got little farms over here that I'm adding, and they're kind of integrated into the mountains, but not disturbing this beautiful water area. Clearly the air is good, no smog or anything, so I'm gonna probably keep working on this tonight on my stream, but it's been really fun to kind of imagine what it might be like,
Post a link out to the stream and I'll retweet it for you. I like that you've chosen that naturistic green approach, and as opposed to how people would vision the future under capitalism, which is always like cyberpunk, dystopian, mega cities.
Yeah.
You can't even see the sky. You've gone completely opposite. It's not fantasy at all, is it? Because it's what the Earth will look like in 500 years or whatever.
It has to. I always think those cyberpunk sort of landscapes are funny because there's literally no sustainable way for that to exist. We'd have to be mass generating air somehow because there's no plants.
Well, as bad as the game,
that's kind of hilarious.
As bad as the game Cyberpunk was to play, at least it had mass rubbish dumps underneath the city. They always tell on themselves, these capitalist versions of the future. In some way,
they do.
I kind of I'm kind of really kind of doesn't I felt like because cyberpunk one of the aesthetic of cyberpunk that came out birthed out of the infrastructure of the colonial Hong Kong, which is brim with really sort of a desolate.
Hong Kong has always been portrayed in the West as this cyberpunk-esque city. I get what you're saying. Anyway,
I mean not Hong Kong, but it's mostly the aesthetic of the buildings and the neon lights. When you whenever you think about like those, I think about like the films like Ghost in the Shell, or that those sort of like punk film that it was like major influence from like the buildings in Hong Kong, which is like I don't know, they sort of like melt that completely when like films like Blade Runner had a bit of a chart into it. So
nice, right?
It's just
That's it, Veets. We're gonna end the show. Tom didn't show up. You can all rag on him on Twitter for not showing up. Don't forget we got merch. Don't forget we got a Patreon. Don't forget everything else that we always say. Don't forget to go and watch Artsy Marks' stream. Harrison, you got anything you want to say right at the end?
No, just thanks for watching.
Nice. Exactly. Right, and on that
And
note,
you can watch the stream.
Go on.
Oh, sorry. at artsy_Marxist on Twitch and Twitter if you want to watch the stream tonight. I forgot to tell you where to find it.
All right, cool. You're going to post it, and then I'm going to retweet it for you in a second anyway, so people can get straight to it.
That is correct.
Awesome. Right.
That's correct.
That's it. I'm just going to let this music play out. Yeah, we'll see you next week. I guess Tom will be here. We'll make him get up. He's got another week of lockdown to go through. We'll see you later.